Going back to back today with our ocean experts, Lorianne LaRocco, and we've got Steve Ferreira now, CEO of Ocean Audit, and going to ask him the hard question first. Steve Ferreira, are you the man who could replace John Porcari?
Oh, I'm taking lobbyist bets that that's going to be a 1-to-1 odds.
Wow.
Confidence. I like it. I like it, Steve. Thank you for joining us today. And I think we should just pick right up where we left off with Lorianne, talking about kind of the same threads. Started off with her continuing this conversation around Russia, Ukraine. And let's get kind of your take on the situation right now, what's going on, especially when it comes to rates.
Well, I think, Kaylee, we have to keep in perspective that Russia-Ukraine really makes up less than 2% of global container trade. Now, what it does a lot of is bulk and the pig iron and the chemicals, and certainly those bulk ships, bulk vessel, different size, Supermax, Capesize, they're being diverted to various northern European ports, and that's going to cause congestion. When you have congestion, obviously it's a backing up, kind of cyclic effect on the rest of the trade, even containers. That's why I went out on a limb a couple of weeks ago and I said that implicitly Ukraine-Russia immediately adds at least $500 to $1,000 an FEU in container trade, even though it's not directly a causal relationship between what's happening in Ukraine, Russia, and say the Far East.
Yeah, so we get those prices changes in the stuff. And good morning, by the way, Steve. Nice to see you again. I haven't spoken to you in some time. One of the things that we talked about yesterday on What the Truck, and I'm really interested in getting your take on this, is the strategy of going after the ocean alliances right now. I mean, I get that there's issues there and certain things, but is now the right time to go after it? And what do you think of the strategy overall?
Well, that's a great question, Michael, and it's a challenging answer. I think that the administration really doesn't have its ducks in a row in terms of understanding the history and the nature that the alliances actually help competition rather than, in my humble opinion, I think that breaking up the alliances could potentially lead to more consolidation, a less number of ocean vendors in the trade, and therefore you're having even more problems with rate levels. Even the FMC Commissioner, Mr. Maffei, didn't believe that breaking up the alliances was the best approach. So it seems like the administration itself has a schism in terms of really where the fine demarcation is. And I think Laurie brought up a good point, with John Porcari's departure. Now it seems like nobody's on first base, and it's even more challenging. So I'm taking what Biden said right now a little bit with lip service. I'd be more concerned about the mashup between the DOJ and the FMC and how the administration might be looking for some quick wins going into the carriers' pockets. I think that's a more challenging issue right now.
So let's touch on that issue a little bit deeper. What does that kind of mashup mean when you're looking at it from a carrier and a forwarder perspective?
Well, I think certainly, Kaylee, what it means is that the FMC, in Biden's write-up on the supply chain pre-State of the Union, he mentioned 42 instances where the FMC has already started some kind of procedures on looking into the carriers to, detention, demurrage, and other pricing activity processes. So I think that the DOJ is going to be hot to trot, so to speak, in terms of getting right out of the gate quickly and lending some expertise to the FMC in terms of perhaps even taking greater action and maybe even a greater purview of what's going on in the ocean carriers' back offices, so to speak, with regards to billing and detention. Now, if that happens, that's certainly going to create enormous pressure on the ocean vendor, and it's going to slow down an already bogged down process, both in invoicing, operations, regulatory, and could de facto be an effect of cause for even deeper price increases going forward. So I think it's a slippery slope that we're on right now, and I certainly look for the DOJ to try to make a big splash to give the Biden administration some wins that we went after the big bad carriers and forwarders.
Even I know the last time that we chatted about 2 weeks ago or so, we were talking about now folks with the ability to bring increased complaints in front of the FMC. And we were talking about kind of, do they have the manpower to deal with these complaints? And what does this mean when it looks like their day-to-day operations? With this partnership with the DOJ now, does that give them more opportunity to deal with more of these complaints? And does that kind of lead into a snowball effect now where you would see more complaints coming in now because complainers will feel like there's the ability to hear their grievances?
Well, you have to understand, I think, Kaylee, that the FMC is a relatively small agency with only 100 or so, 120, 130 employees. Some have some deep background, others more periphery of background on the Ocean Shipping Reform Act and container shipping. The DOJ has no ocean experience. So I think the real danger is basically triggering investigations and acts where there may be less expertise going into the regulatory efforts to bring the Biden administration some wins. And I think that the best way that beneficial cargo owners can handle this, and I've been preaching this now for the last couple of weeks, is, for example, right now there's a public comment period on detention and demurrage. I do believe that the carriers do not want DOJ and FMC looking in their back office right now, processes. And the best way right now is for many of the ocean vendors and freight forwarders to help settle a lot of the detention, demurrage claims and inquiries that their own clients have. I think that by itself will take a lot of pressure off of the trade and maybe give us a little bit of a sense of normalcy. Because right now, the way I see it, this FMC DOJ actually adds ocean freight incremental costs as opposed to detracting from it.
Yeah, Steve. So, speaking of normalcy, keeping things smooth, costs and daily settlements, you can see where I'm going with this. Ocean container futures began trading. Let me hear your thoughts on that. Is it the right time right now to do this? Rates are so high, et cetera, and probably just going to keep going higher.
Well, I had a chance to talk to Zivi Schreiber, the CEO of FreightWaves, on the Global Supply Chain Week here, of course, here on FreightWaves. And Zivi came out with a little bit more tighter description, which I think is going to help beneficial cargo owners appreciate this a little bit better, Michael. But I think in general, the essence is that if you buy futures now and 6 months later, they're worth 3 times more. It's not that you're booking freight with the futures. The futures is strictly a cash settlement, which allows you to hedge against higher rates downstream. I do believe that it's an attractive proposition. I wouldn't bet the farm on it, but I definitely like other entities like NYSHEX and performance-based contracting. I think futures is definitely a strategy that the top 100 BCOs will definitely be looking at.
I would think they would. I mean, it's a cash settled, it's a hedging. You're not buying actual, there's no container. Right? There is no container.
It's not physical, right?
The goal of it is not to make money or lose money on it if you're a BCO, if you're a direct player. It's a zero-sum game. It's to keep your costs smooth, correct?
It is. And that's why, Zivi's write-up a day or two ago, he cited an example of using it for, say, 50 containers or 100 containers. I think that's a spectacular first dip into the pond way for finance teams to start to look at using this facility as a hedging feature going forward. I do believe that we are in a preponderance of increasing rates, not to the extent that we're hearing coming out of that shipping conference in California, where we're going to go from 15,000 to 30,000. But I think certainly right now I spot checked the rates today. We're at 16,000. 16,000 West Coast, 18,000 East Coast on spot rate, and contracted rates are much higher than anyone ever anticipated. So I think it's a great hedge.
Steve, before we let you go today, we talked to Lorianne about those Russian vessels bringing Russian oil over and getting ready to anchor here in the next few days. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you think that means and where you think that the ethical, moral lines lay on those companies who had already bought the oil, whether they're going to honor those purchases and take them in and use them, or if they should just leave it be?
Yeah, Lori and I have talked about Russian oil as a byproduct of imports now for the last 4 or 5 years. She and I have always had kind of a dynamic dialogue on them. Certainly, we've seen a little bit of a fall off on Russian oil, over the last year or two. But certainly, as we speak now, on behalf, I believe, of Valero, the large oil producer, a Russian vessel just a day or two ago offloaded 300,000 barrels. I think it might be the reason of significance to me is it might be one of the last vessels we see because I believe that President Biden may be banning. Now that's a ban on Russian flag vessels. I don't believe this vessel was Russian flagged, but yet it did have Russian products. So I think we have to somehow understand the regulatory line of whether a vessel is foreign flagged and still has Russia products on. Will it still be allowed? I don't know if that's been solved yet, Kaylee.
All right, Steve. Well, thank you for those updates today. We won't catch you tomorrow, which is why you were joining us with our Airwaves on Thursday. But thank you for being here nonetheless. Great to have you as always.
Thank you. Good to see you. Bye.
Thanks, Steve. Have a great weekend.